Hello, welcome to another Advocata podcast at Advocata Studio. As you know, the government of Sri Lanka is mainly targeting to digitize the entire economy. President has appointed an advisor to support on the digital infrastructure and digitizing the entire Sri Lankan economy. At the same time, we are planning to launch, in the sense Sri Lankan government is planning to launch GovPay in the coming days. So there's a big conversation around what is going to happen with Sri Lanka's digital economy. And we are honored to have Dr. Sewak Sharma, who is one of the main brains behind India's entire digitization, mainly on the Aadhaar system. Dr. Sharma, we are honored to have you. And how is Colombo treating you so far?
Well, thank you very much, Dana, for sort of inviting me here in Advocata. It has been a pleasure. I came here yesterday evening, and it has been wonderful. Colombo is a beautiful city, and of course, I had come previously also to Sri Lanka, and it's a beautiful country. So we'll come back again and again and again.
And a warm welcome to Colombo and Sri Lanka, and for all the good work that we have been doing and supporting. Just for our viewers, I would like to mention Dr. Sharma was the Director General of Unique Identification Authority of India, mainly known as UIDAI, and also the Chairman of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India and the Chief Executive Officer of the National Health Authority of India. So he's now retired, but he has been often called by the government to serve India. So we are deeply honored. Just to get things started. So please explain us what is this Aadhaar system, because Sri Lankans are very new. Every time, the biggest thing we know is we know about the digital payment systems and things like that. But explain how this concept came about and what is it and what are the benefits. First, to understand how this basically came about.
Well, thank you very much once again for inviting me here. Let me begin where it all began.
Yeah.
It began in the year 2006. So what happened was that in India, and I'm sure in Sri Lanka too, we are supporting the poor and the marginalized people, providing them subsidies, providing them benefits, providing them, things at cheaper rates, ration, etc. So we have those kinds of programs to support its social safety net in some sense. So we had that program since long back, but in 2006, a committee was appointed to go into the question as to how we can reduce the leakages in these programs. Mm-hmm. And one of the most important leakage was that people were able to create ghost entries and duplicate entries.
Right.
So I am Sewak Sharma, and I can become another entry, RS Sharma, and then Ram Sharma, and stuff like that.
Right.
Even when somebody doesn't exist, those guys can also get into the system.
Right. So
how do you remove duplicates and ghost from a beneficiary database was one question.
Right.
So that, the committee was created under the chairmanship of the then External Affairs Minister, Dr. Pranab Mukherjee, who later became President of India. He was External Affairs Minister then, and then, of course, a number of other ministers also. And they deliberated. And in 2008, December, they decided that we should create a unique identification authority of India. Mm-hmm. And the job of creating unique identities. Now the question was not families, but individuals, because ultimately a family is a collection of individuals.
Right.
So that, authority be created. So that is how this authority was created. In 2009, July, both me and my chairman, Mr. Nandan Nilekani, we joined. I became the CEO and the mission director of that project. And therefore, from the government's point of view, one of the issues was duplicate and fakes removal from the beneficiary database so that, leakages get reduced. And it is estimated that leakages were of the order of about 20%, which is a very significant amount. Then the other part was also very important, which was that because people did not have any verifiable identity, therefore they were actually excluded from many formal systems of the governance. So, for example, if you have to open a bank account, one of the things which you have to do is to do KYC, as they say, know your customer. Which means who are you? Prove that you are who you claim to be. That's one fundamental question.
Yeah.
And that people did not have that identity paper.
Mainly the poorest of the poor.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what we called a poverty premium, which means a poor person has to pay more money to do the same work done as compared to a rich person. So this guy pays more. So essentially they were not able to, sort of access any formal systems because there was no verifiable identity with the people. So from a government perspective, it was revenue, it was leakages. From the people's perspective, it was empowerment to have an identity paper which they can prove, and they can open bank account, they can get ration, they can do telephone connections, for example, mobile SIMs. That is what was the context in which this whole program was started. The challenge was to have a unique identity for each person.
Right.
Now, the challenge was not merely, it was a huge technological challenge because nowhere on the planet that exercise had been done.
Okay.
So basically, we also were aware that mere demographic deduplication will not do. As I explained to you, I am Ram Sewak Sharma, I can become R.S. Sharma. So therefore, you will never come to know that the Ram Sewak Sharma and R.S. Sharma are the same, one and the same people.
Yeah.
So we had to use what is called biometrics to identify a person uniquely. Now, there are two types of biometrics. I mean, there are multiple biometrics, of course, but two which can be easily captured. One is fingerprints. And another is iris images. Now, iris was very much underdeveloped technology way back in 2009. So we started doing fingerprint. We considered some fingerprints.
Right.
Now, fingerprints actually, in a way, there was no data available for large-scale deduplication in fingerprints.
Right.
There was a data of some European country of 25 million, which essentially says that fingerprints can be as accurate as 95%, which means 5% inaccuracies will be there.
Right.
And in India's population of 1.3 billion, you will have 65 million people having duplicate identities. So fingerprints don't work alone. So then we decided to use iris also as one of the another independent biometric modality to ensure uniqueness.
So you got the fingerprint, and the iris both, or is it only the iris?
No, it's both, because basically, we were also conscious of the fact that we were creating a digital identity.
Right.
Not really issuing an identity number to a person, but also ensuring that he or she is able to authenticate himself or herself before any public authority or anybody, or for accessing any system. That is one of the, so basically biometric authentication.
Right.
Now, authentication using iris is a bit difficult because you have to have the iris scanners. But authentication using the fingerprint is much easier because you have a very lightweight single fingerprint device which you can just put in and you can get authenticated. So therefore, we use both fingerprints and iris.
Got it. So I have a lot of questions from the introduction. So you basically mentioned, given the scale of India, like 1.3 billion people, and this is the first time it happened. So just give some context how this was done in other countries. Dr. Sharma, no, I mean, now when you go to US, they must also have some level of identity card system to, at least it may not be the best way, but to authenticate that, to claim that you are who you are to be claimed to be. And Sri Lanka also had like a basic identity card system, which is like a laminated card. Some people started to have a chip and things like that. So how the other countries were doing it, you mean, is it the first time that your biometrics being used at this scale? Or what is unique about this India's approach?
Now, that's a very good question, actually. What happened in Europe and other places, you must understand that there the the issue of identity is important, but everybody has an identity paper.
Right.
Because, when you are born in Sweden, for example, you are given an identity number, national identity number, NIN as they call it.
Yeah.
So NIN in the developed countries is a very well-established concept.
Right.
We also should have had that NIN because we have the birth and death registration system. But unfortunately, the system is not really very, very robust.
Right.
Many children which are born, they are not registered in that system and stuff like that.
Right.
So therefore, the Europeans don't have that kind of problem. Though, of course, UK had started UK's identity card, UK's ID card. And that project was obviously abolished due to some political, change of government, etc. But then again, this was what is unique about India is, number one, no country in the world had done this at this scale. That's number one. Number two is also that India's ID system is purely next generation digital identity.
Right.
So we don't issue what is called a card.
Right.
Though, of course, people have started calling Aadhaar card.
Right. There's no card.
But there's not
no
a
card.
I mean, Aadhaar is just a number.
Number.
And that number is attached to an individual due to his biometric markers.
Right.
And that basically becomes the unique thing. And you can print that thing on the, suppose you lose the card. And in India, people are very poor. Sometimes their house gets burnt or floods or whatever. So therefore, they may lose the card. So the idea was that we should not have such kind of, system where cards will have their own life cycle, management in terms of distribution, etc. So they are just numbers, number one. And number two, the authentication system never existed anywhere in the world. Which means, that I just have a number and I claim that I am R.S. Sharma. And I can prove before you that I am indeed R.S. Sharma because there is a third party which actually, provides that authentication saying yes and no. So if I put R.S. Sharma and my fingerprint, it will say yes, this is indeed R.S. Sharma. So that authentication system was nowhere in the world. So basically this kind of, and biometrics, as you know, Dana, it is essentially, used to the forensic purposes, crimes, investigations, and fingerprints on the crime scene, etc. This is the typical use of biometrics.
Right.
Now, biometrics for such a developmental project, and by the way, this is not a citizenship project, because Aadhaar did not even have a citizenship. It said Aadhaar is a proof of identity, not of citizenship. So if there is a Sri Lankan person who is there, resident in India, he or she will get Aadhaar.
Right.
There's no problem. Even a diplomat do get Aadhaar. So essentially, Aadhaar is just a proof of identity. And we are insisting that this ID proof or ID verification must be done online. So therefore, it is from the beginning itself, the digital is not an afterthought.
Right.
Digital is the, prior kind of, from the beginning, it's ab initio, as they say in legal parlance.
Right.
That was what was done.
Excellent. So, very interesting. So, now to capture that biometrics and now to access like at a scale at India, which we cannot even imagine, how that infrastructure was developed, because then you have to have scanners, and not only the scanners to get the fingerprint, but when someone goes to the bank, even without that number, when you put that fingerprint or your iris, it has to capture, it has to come to the government. And let's come to the latter part, like how your social safety net was incorporated to that, but how that was done and what was the government's approach?
No, there are two issues. One issue is, getting a number.
Right.
Based on your biometrics and based on your demographic data. That's number one, which is a one-time affair.
Right.
Once you get an Aadhaar, that Aadhaar is for lifetime.
Right.
Even beyond lifetime, because that number is never reused again. And the reason is very simple. It's a 12-digit number.
Right.
11 digits are essentially the real significant digits.
Right.
12th digit is what is called a check digit.
Right.
So basically, just to ensure that somebody is not having an error in entry.
Right.
So 6-5 can you can enter 5-6 and then the number will say no. So 11 digits can constitute 10 to the power 11 numbers, which is actually 100 billion. We are only 1.3 billion or 1.4 billion compared to that number of space.
Right.
So that's one part. So it's once in a lifetime activity. Getting enrolled into Aadhaar system.
Got it.
And then authenticating again and again and again is, multiple time activity. So for your information, we have 1.4 billion Aadhaar. And thus far, we have done 116 billion authentications.
Right.
So every Indian has authenticated, 116 times or 100 times in this space. So that's the first answer to your question, that these two are different. Now, let's go to the first part, which is enrollment.
Right.
Now, how do you develop an enrollment ecosystem? One way was to procure a lot of these machines, a laptop, a camera, a scanner, and other things. So that's one approach. Now, we did not buy even a single camera, a single laptop, nothing.
Right.
UIDAI did not do anything of the kind.
Okay.
What we decided was that, okay, I will give you 50 rupees if you give me one person's data.
Right.
Which is good enough for generating an Aadhaar.
Right.
Okay. If you give me data of one person, I'll give you 50 rupees. So essentially, this was the way it was done. Now, I gave 50 rupees to the state governments. State government, as you know, India is a federal country.
Yeah.
So state governments actually subcontracted it in some sense.
Right.
Or hired the enrollment agencies, and they discovered the rate. So state government found out that this 50 rupees is a very rich, and we can do it in 30 rupees only. So states saved 20 rupees for their other digital works.
Right.
So this is how it worked. And this is the only project where the subsequently 50 rupees was reduced to 40 rupees.
Right.
Typically projects rise in cost.
Correct.
But this is a completely different example.
So interesting.
So essentially, it was an incentive aligned, number one. Number two, outcome based system.
Right.
It is not something how many enrollments I have done. No, I am not interested in that. I am interested in quality enrollment data which can generate an Aadhaar, which means this person has not been enrolled before. Because if he is enrolled before, I'll catch him at the back end.
Right.
So this is at one point in time, we were having about 2 million, numbers coming every day. 2 million enrollments. Because the problem is that India based 1.3 billion. Suppose you do 1 million per day. Now 1.3 billion is 1300 billion.
Yeah.
So you will take 1300 working days, which means you will take about 5 years, right? And if you do it at 1 million per day, 5 years, in 5 years, a lot of children would have been born. A lot of people would have died. So it will never complete. So you have to do it at a fast speed. So speed, scale, technology, these are very many things which had to go into the consideration.
So just want to understand, this is very interesting and exciting. So you basically had a incentive scheme for 50 rupees per person. You allocate that money to the federal government, or like the state government. So what was the back end looks like? Can you give a color of, because then the state government will ask third party organizations to provide that data, collect that data, and they will earn whatever that commission or that payment. But how was the back end created? How that biometrics and their names and whatever that information, and what was the information fields looks like, and how it was integrated to the back end, and how do you authenticate? Just explain, there were no duplicate entries, or whether same person is trying to enter twice.
So one is that this is the front end, which is basically enrollment ecosystem.
Yeah.
And let's not call it incentive. Let's call it outcome-based payments.
Outcome-based payment, okay.
Okay, because incentive gives a feeling as if somebody is being benefited.
Benefited, correct.
It's a different issue, because what may happen is that those areas which are not having electricity, or which are having all kinds of difficult, infrastructure, there the rate which the agencies will quote will be much higher, sometimes higher than 50 rupees also. In places which are city-based places where the population density is very high, the agencies will quote much less per capita, per person. So that's that we left it to the state government. And there are multiple banks, for example, insurance companies, for example. They were all involved in this.
Right.
And we said, no, this area is not reserved for one person.
Right.
This area is open for everybody.
Right.
So
Okay.
anybody can go and, do the enrollment.
Right.
So that is how we could achieve speed. Otherwise, if I give area X to somebody and that somebody is slow, then it never happens.
Happens.
So we said, no, nothing doing. This is not reserved for you. If you do fast, you will get the money. If other person does fast, he will get. So basically, we introduced that competition.
Wow.
So that's how the enrollment. Now on the back-end infrastructure,
Yeah.
as I explained to you that this whole thing has never been done before.
Yes.
Anywhere in the world. So essentially, we first of all did what is called the proof of concept.
Mm-hmm.
We actually wanted to figure out whether this technology will work at such scale or not. Because what happens is that digital technologies, they are very elegant when the number is low sometimes, but they don't scale up that gracefully.
Yeah.
So and it's what is called, I will not use the computer jargon for your viewers, but this is what is called a polynomial problem.
Right.
It's not a straight line problem. It's not as if you keep on upgrading it. It's like it goes it becomes
exponential.
very difficult. Not exponential, polynomial. Let's put it this way. Exponential is very difficult to solve.
Yeah.
So what happens is that we first of all did a proof of concept and figured out whether it is possible or not.
Right.
And then we hired, because we did not. By the way, we all the technology stack which we used in Aadhaar was open source.
Right.
We never used even a single proprietary. We used Linux for operating system. Then we used Hadoop. We used other kinds of technology step. I don't want to get into that. So that's how we used. Now there was no deduplication agencies available which could do at such a scale.
Right.
Which actually in the open source domain.
Right.
Sorry to say that. Now we hired not one but 3 agencies to do the deduplication.
Right.
And they actually we were giving the enrollment data pointers to them without telling whose data it is.
Right.
So it's perfectly anonymized and the guys don't know whose data it is. And they had the gallery, which means the people who have been issued Aadhaar. And then, if I give data to somebody, some agency which does a deduplication, they will check against every entry, every person in the gallery.
Right.
And if it matches, then they will reject it, saying that this guy is already enrolled. If it does not match, then they will say yes, they will insert that person's data in the gallery, and everybody, they will have a common gallery, so everybody is now aware that this particular data is also a part of the gallery, number one. Number two, in order to ensure that these agencies are good at accuracy, otherwise, they can keep on inserting the data and say, oh, everybody is and the person who is getting the duplicates, he will be very happy. I'm getting a duplicate Aadhaar, so I can get double benefits.
Yeah.
So basically, we used to, run against each other. So suppose this fellow says, this data is available. Then without telling the other guy that this is already a rejected, enrollment, I will give it to them and see what they say.
Right.
So in a way, we ensured that multiple enrollment agencies are able to do a good job, number one. Number two, they are accurate. Number three, they use the minimal hardware, because we made a formula as to how we will allocate the enrollment packets to each one of them. And if somebody is good at accuracy, we will give more packets. Somebody is good at speed, we will give him more packet. Somebody who requires least hardware, because hardware was ours, then we will give him more packets. So this is how we actually did. And thereafter, we did a what is called test.
Mm-hmm.
And we tested the data at about 78 million level. And we found that our accuracy was as high as 99.976%. So of course, 0.00 whatever percent which is left out is also significant. About 100,000 people will have probably duplicate Aadhaar, but that's a very insignificant number. So that is how we have been able to achieve the accuracy.
Excellent. Can you explain like how those when you mentioned that it was given to the state governments, and how they collected? Was it in centers, or what was the hardware used? Can you explain like how this was done in multiple?
Absolutely. That's again a very good question, because the state governments were provided with the responsibility of getting the data to us.
Right.
Now, they obviously, as I explained to you, they hired agencies.
Yeah.
And those agencies hired the agents in a way. I mean, they had their own employees or whatever, contractors you call it. And they actually, we first of all prescribed the minimal standards of the equipment which is required for doing a good enrollment.
Right.
So what should be the megapixels of a camera? What should be the megapixels of a fingerprint scanner? What is the standard of a the scanner of the iris? And of course, you don't have to prescribe the laptops standard because they were already there. So essentially, we prescribed standards. We did not prescribe any make or other things.
Right.
We said your hardware should satisfy these standards. And these were not very exacting standards, let me tell you.
Right.
Logitech cameras, for example, they were simply used. Some people said you use Canon camera and other kinds of brands. We nothing doing. We will not prescribe any brand because then we are giving an advantage to that brand.
Right.
So we prescribed that. So that's one part.
Right.
And also, we now created a system where we were able to figure out as to what is the kind of hardware which is being used in enrolling this person.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that every state government has to inspect. The very data which is collected, the data itself actually incorporates a lot of metadata.
Right.
Which actually tells how much time the fellow has taken, how much errors he has done, how many times he has used the backspace. Everything was there. We collected as many as 112, these metadata.
Right.
So we knew about exactly what it is. So this is the way. And those guys then these agencies purchased those hardware which was compatible with the standards prescribed by us.
And at their cost. There's no...
At their cost. Absolutely. It is a completely OPEX model. We are not having any capex.
As long as you get the one person's data, you give 50 rupees.
One person's data, and that too, if the person's data is good, which means he is not already duplicate data will not pay for.
Understood.
So that's how it is. So basically, we created that ecosystem. Multiple agencies came up. And I explained to you at one point in time, we were having 20,000 enrollment stations. And the state government were given the responsibility of actually the security of the enrollment guys, law and order. There were a lot of crowds on each of these enrollment centers to enroll. And the one enrollment station can do about 50 to 60, enrollments in a day. And they had about 2-3 enrollment, kind of machines.
Right.
Four machines. So they can do only 200. Now, suppose there are 400 fellows or 500 fellows who accumulate and want. So it was a bit difficult. So therefore, the state governments actually manage that whole thing.
Excellent.
So state governments manage they also manage the the agencies will tell that I'm going to this village this day. Then they will alert the local sort of administrators in that village, and who will do the sort of thing.
Got it. So how did you create the enthusiasm for people? Because for people, they might say, okay, why should I go to this center and give my fingerprint? How did you got the enthusiasm by the people? Was it the responsibility by that agencies and the state government, or whether there was a central plan or like a central campaign or something being implemented? And what was the incentive for a citizen to come? I understand for the data collection agency, okay, they will get 50 rupees or whatever that they are thing. But for a citizen, why should they go and do this?
Identity document is a very powerful incentive in itself. So one thing which we actually said in the beginning itself, that getting an Aadhaar number will not entitle you for anything.
Right.
Neither income, nor ration, nor citizenship, nothing. It is just an identity. And believe me, 40% of the people of our country did not have a provable identity paper.
Wow.
And you will ask me the next question, that if I reached the station and I said I am Ranatunga or I am XYZ, then you will enroll me as Ranatunga, right?
Yeah.
If you ask me, prove that you are Ranatunga, I don't have the paper to prove it.
Yeah.
So you can say, oh, not people will be, given different identities than what they are.
Yeah.
Yes, they can be. But remember, next time when I go as Sewak Sharma, the fellow will say, friend, you are Ranatunga. You are not Sewak Sharma. You will not get this identity as Sewak Sharma. So essentially, we realize that technology can ensure that people, do right things. Because first time I go to the identity document, first time I enroll, I'll be enrolling as my real name, typically. Next time I'll try to game the system.
Yeah.
So next time I will be rejected.
Yeah.
So in this way, we were able to ensure
Right.
that, that we don't require multiple documents, but some basic document saying that I know this person, this is so and so. So we used the letterheads of the local representatives, which we call Pradhan or Sarpanch or somebody at the panchayat level.
Right.
They will say, oh, this person I know, this is so and so. We were not really relying on that. That could be false also. And then we realized that as many as 40% of the people in this country got enrolled using documents which were not primarily an identity document.
Got it. So now we know the system, how you did it, how this biometrics data was collected. The next question was, generally when this data is collected, the question on data security.
Absolutely.
How did you ensure, and what was the structure, the policy framework, and I would say like the benchmarks that you had to ensure the data security and that data is, not shared with anyone else?
That's an excellent question. In fact, data security was uppermost in our mind. So what we did was we actually created a policy where we said that data, either in what is called in rest or in transit, will always be encrypted. And the encryption standards were 2056, 2056 bits encryption standard, which is the highest standard. Obviously one can have more high than, but basically it's a very difficult encryption to crack.
Right.
So when a person, let's say, enrolled somebody, immediately after he enrolls, the data gets locked, the data gets encrypted. So even that person does not have access to the data. Even the enrollment agent does not have access to the data. Suppose, you can always say he can always sell the data.
Yeah.
Now he doesn't have the access, number one. Number two, even suppose the laptop gets stolen.
Yeah.
Nobody can see the data because it's all encrypted. So similarly, when you send the data, because at that time you did not have an online transmission facility to send the data to what we call CIDR, which is Central Identities Depository system. There, because we had to do it centrally, we cannot do it state-wise, because state-wise one person can, be in one state and then, so the data of 1.4 billion people has to be at one place. Then and only then we can do a complete deduplication. So essentially the data was always encrypted. And just for your information, not even a single biometric data has been hacked from the Aadhaar system till date.
Right. Excellent. So the next question is, what was the resistance or like the acceptance by the people on this data security issue? Because it's not only sometimes the people, there are the agencies, there are civil society organizations who questions, and how did you convince them? And also sometimes the government bureaucrats. Because I remember when Sri Lanka was in conversation of a digital NIC, and one question was, of course we are coming from like a 30-year-long war, that there will be surveillance and people can track, trace, and some information can be taken centrally. I have followed Estonia, and they are like, if some government agent like try to get your data, then there'll be an SMS system. What was the resistance, acceptance? How did you manage it?
No, I think that's again a very, very important and excellent question. So let me begin by prefacing that Aadhaar is one project which has been demonized, if I use that strong term, demonized, by all kinds of fellows.
Right.
It's okay. So it has, everybody had challenged it. There were 4-5 groups, let's say, who challenged it. So let me, name number one group.
Right.
Number one group is basically, they said that if you do Aadhaar, the government will have access to all your data.
Yeah.
So it is a completely surveillance state.
Yeah.
They will know exactly where you are going, what you are purchasing because of authentication systems. And therefore, it's a complete 1984 of George Orwell. That's what they used to, sort
Right.
of completely state which is surveillance state. Others were saying that it will violate privacy. And privacy is a fundamental right, they claimed, though it was not at that point in time. So it will violate privacy. The third group was the group which basically said that I am the NGO, I am the non-governmental organization. People will be, because you are now going to deliver subsidies or benefits using the authentication system.
Mm-hmm.
So people will be excluded from the benefit system because they will not be able to authenticate. Why? Because fingerprints of old people, of laborers, they all get washed out. And therefore, there is a serious problem of exclusion due to Aadhaar.
Mm-hmm.
There are the third fellows.
Right.
The fourth kind of group was the group which says that all foreigners will get Indian citizenship.
Right.
All illegal immigrants in this country will get Indian citizenships, and there will be a huge inflow of people getting Aadhaar. So that were the four groups, and we had to, and there was a PIL in the Supreme Court, number of PIL, more than 100 I'm told.
Sorry, what do you mean by PIL?
PIL is basically public interest litigation.
Okay.
So let's say if my right or my community's rights are being violated, and I may not have a locus standi, as locus means I don't have the reason to argue before a court. The courts now have evolved public interest litigation, which is basically something of public interest can be brought before the court, which violates any of the rights, and the courts can, sort of give their judgments. So essentially, the public interest litigations were filed before the Honorable Supreme Court and many high courts also to say that Aadhaar violates privacy.
Right.
So these were the groups, and there was a huge opposition, obviously. But to the credit of our policymakers and political class, put it this way, I would say that they were very, very clear that this particular thing will benefit their electorates.
Do you mean even the opposition?
Yes, because we created a bipartisan kind of acceptance to this concept.
Because otherwise, generally, it gets politicized, and the other side say, yeah.
Absolutely.
So you created a bipartisan.
Yes. So my chairman, Nandan Nilekani, he would go meet the chief ministers. Our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, he was Chief Minister of Gujarat way back in 2000, onwards. So I myself enrolled him in 2011 or 12, I'm not sure, on the Gujarat Day on 1st of May. So this way, he basically met the chief ministers, the ministers, the opposition leaders, everybody, and explained the concept, saying that this is something which is going to happen for development. So to that extent, I think we had huge political bipartisan support.
Right.
But the groups, India is a vibrant democracy, and sometimes it is too vibrant, So everybody, people had that concern, and rightly so. I'm not denying that, privacy is not a concern. In fact, so much so that privacy was not a fundamental right till then. The Honorable Supreme Court constituted a constitution bench which went into the question as to whether privacy is a fundamental right or not. And they declared that privacy is a fundamental right which is actually related to the right of life. So in a way, it's a fundamental right. And after that, they decided, okay, if it is fundamental right, whether Aadhaar violates that right or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then they came up with the complete judgment, 1600 pages judgment, which essentially dealt into various questions as to whether Aadhaar creates a surveillance state or not, whether Aadhaar violates privacy or not, whether Aadhaar profiles citizens or not. And the answers to these questions were all in the negative. So the highest court of land cleared Aadhaar. And imagine this happened in 2018. We started Aadhaar in 2009. This happened because we introduced a concept called privacy by design. When you design a digital artifact, you design it in such a way, incorporate privacy into it. So the basic concepts of privacy, information, notice, if I do authentication, immediately I am notified on my mobile or my mail, whatever, saying that you have done this authentication. If you have not done, please tell us. So in a way, this consent, notice, everything is incorporated since the beginning itself. So therefore, to your question whether people opposed it or not, yes, they opposed, and this was heavily contested project in that sense of the term. And secondly, whether ultimately it came out of that part or not, yes, it came out because the Honorable Supreme Court of India declared that Aadhaar does not violate privacy.
And how did you manage? You brought a very important point of bringing that bipartisan sort of consent to avoid making it political, but addressing the other issues, like how did you negotiate with? You said like the concern of foreign citizens getting citizenship in India, but you specifically mentioned, you was very clear that this was only an identification method. It is not the immigration. This is not about personal registration. It's just an identification that you can claim who you are with that identification number. Any other strategies that you used on managing these different stakeholders?
No, as I said, we on the many issues, for example, if you get an Aadhaar letter, and I have one here with me, there is a very clear stipulation. Number one line is Aadhaar is a proof of identity, not of citizenship.
Right.
Two is authenticate online, because we are not putting any intelligent card or chips, etc. into the letter. I mean, it's a simple letter which anybody can copy and write and do whatever. So we say this has no validity in that sense of the term, unless it's a very low kind of risk situation where you want to enter somewhere and you just show the card. That person is not going to check with your, it doesn't need fingerprint. I mean, it depends. But if I'm doing $1 million transaction, then obviously you need much more robust authentication. So authentication should be proportional to the kind of risk which you carry. So that's one part. But I think what is important is that this whole issue of creating that bipartisan thing was done because ultimately we actually conveyed effectively that look, this is something which is very, very useful. In fact, the opposition party at that time, BJP, which is now in power, they had actually in their manifesto, they had said that we will scrap Aadhaar or modify Aadhaar. I don't know what exactly was the term, but this is what they said. And then thereafter, our Honorable Prime Minister, when he took charge on 26th of May 2014, and I happened to be the Secretary of Electronics and Department in Government of India. I had moved on from Aadhaar and went as Chief Secretary on one of the states, and then I came back again, fortunately for me, as Secretary IT. And then I, presented before the Honorable Prime Minister saying that this is something which is going to be transformational for our country because it is going to save you. We are at that point in time giving 5 lakh crores of subsidy of various types. We get food subsidy, we have the National Safety Assistance Program, we have scholarships, we have the other kinds of, LPG subsidy, other things. And they were 5 lakh. And, even 10% leakage means 50,000 crores. And we are spending a fraction of that money, about 8 to 9,000 crores only in Aadhaar. So a project which has total expenditure with a 7-year life cycle expenditure of about less than 10,000 crores. And if it is going to give a return of 50,000 crores a year minimum, look what kind of project it is. So our Prime Minister actually, he sort of went ahead, and he is the one who actually accelerated the use of Aadhaar.
Got it. Did you bring any other legislation to ensure data security and these privacy concerns when Aadhaar was floated? Did you have to bring like any other legislation to, or like the changes to the constitution, or any other additional augmented legislation to make sure that the data protection and the data security is assured?
Absolutely, absolutely. In the initial period, we did not have a legislation. But later on, this government actually has enacted a legislation, which is the Aadhaar Services of Delivery. Something, I'm forgetting the name of the
Right.
act, but they enacted an act which actually prescribed as to what will be the personally sensitive data, what is the normal data, and all kinds of things. So you can go through that act. It actually prescribes data security, privacy, consent, notice, everything. And the whole structure as to how the whole unique ID authority of India is going to be governed. There will be a chairman, there will be a CEO. So there is a law, number one. Number two, further, recently the government had, not recently so much, but about a couple of years back probably, 1 year back, they have enacted what is called Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, DPDP bill as they say. It has DPDP Act, not bill now, because it was passed by Parliament. So that actually again puts a seal on the how the data will be protected, what is the consent, and it actually the DPDP Act puts the ownership of the data with what is called the data principle, which means if it is my data, I will control that data. So that's very powerful act which has been enacted in our country.
Excellent. Now let's come to also Sri Lanka. And because we do not have that kind of a system, we also pretty much has been discussing about the same problems that you mentioned. Though we are a smaller population, we also has a social safety net program. It was earlier called Samurdhi, and then it was mentioned as Swasuma, and this conversation is there. How do you think on what are your thoughts on Sri Lanka's public digital infrastructure, and what things that we have to keep in mind learning from Aadhaar? Or do you have any recommendations for us?
Well, I think, I don't need to have any recommendation for you. I'm not really that big to give recommendations to countries. But certainly, I would say that I'm aware of a project which has been in the works for quite some time now. It's called SLUID project, Sri Lankan UID project. And I have sort of seen the news articles and other things. So it's happening, but our experience is that it's an extremely powerful, empowering tool in the hands of the citizen to actually access various systems of governance and also clean up the databases. It has cleaned up for example, PAN database, personal account number, for which is an income tax database, income tax related database. So it has cleaned up multiple databases. So my view, it will be very good, and it's a beautiful digital public infrastructure because, unlike the physical infrastructure, which are common infrastructures, there's something called tragedy of commons, as they call.
Yeah.
You must be aware of that.
Yeah.
So basically what happens if there is a grassland which everybody is able to sort of put his cattle onto, then and nobody maintains the grassland, then it gets dried up and stuff like that. So it's a tragedy. In a digital part, it's really beautiful because the more you use it, it's inexhaustible, so to say. So DPI, or digital public infrastructure, does not get consumed by more uses. So we are, for example, as I explained to you, that we are doing authentications of 15 billion authentications per month, that kind of thing. So people are, getting mobile SIM cards, people are getting direct benefit transfers, and we also evolved, direct benefit transfers. So now today, I don't have to know your bank or bank account number. I just have to know your Aadhaar number and the money will go directly to your bank account. So that's direct benefit transfer. And we used it in COVID heavily. $45 billion were transferred. If I'm not wrong, my figures was transferred to our farmers. Our Prime Minister transferred that money, the Kisan Samriddhi Yojana, Kisan Samman Yojana. So that's what so basically it is an instrument. Aadhaar is today central to the public service delivery systems in India. Now, and it's a horizontal infrastructure. Also understand this. This is very, very powerful. Payments and identity. These two are permeating into every domain. So whether it is health, agriculture, social security, whatever, they will all be used.
That's where I want to come. Now, okay, now the identification problem is solved. You actually touched upon that. But then afterwards, how did this get connected with you mentioned about the payment systems and also the social safety net. How then it was scaled out, and what was the other infrastructure or like the other systems that you need to bring in and how that interconnection took place?
So one is that we did not make Aadhaar as a functional identity.
Right.
Which means it is not used only for a particular purpose. It is purpose agnostic.
Right.
It is actually a foundational identity. Let's understand the difference.
Yeah.
So this is something which can be plugged. So let me give an example. Suppose I am opening a bank account.
Right.
So the first thing which I have to do is to prove my identity.
Yeah.
And this can be done digitally, which means that I enter my Aadhaar number and I, use my OTP now there are multiple flavors of authentication.
Right.
OTP is one of them, iris is another one of them, fingerprint is another one of them. So there are multiple. Now face authentication. Face also is now working at a scale.
Right.
Now the technology is there. We are using face in DigiYatra, for example. When I travel from place A to place B, I just have to enroll. Just say that I'm traveling, and when I go there, nobody asks me any question. My face is authenticated. I am able to go inside. So there are multiple ways to authenticate.
Right.
So basically, what happens is now it is able to plug in. So when I'm opening a bank account, I am able to authenticate my identity using Aadhaar. The authorization, which is basically doing transactions on the banking system. Once I am authenticated, then I get into the system and then I can do the transaction. Okay. So sitting at home, I can open a bank account. So this is so basically this identity, because it is digital, online, pluggable, therefore it is able to be used in any transaction which requires identity authentication. And most of the transactions, first part is prove that you are who you claim to be. Now there are three ways of authenticating. Okay, what you know is username and password.
Yeah.
What you have is like card, and username and password and cards are proxyable, which means you can give it to your
Someone
son
else,
and then he can do the transaction, right?
Yeah.
He can go to the ATM and, if he knows your PIN. So basically what you know, what you have, and who you are, what you are. Now what you are is something extremely personal to you.
Yeah.
So if you are doing some very, very important transactions, you will prove that you are who you claim to be. And in such a manner that you cannot transfer that proof to anybody else. You can't give your fingerprint to anybody. You can't give your iris to anybody. So that way, what has happened is that because it's a foundational identity, it is able to be used horizontally in all kinds of domains.
Got it. So just a quick question now. If so you mentioned that someone can open a bank account from home. So, of course, so now how does that take place? You mentioned the three layers or the three bubbles on identification. What you know, what you have, and what you are. So when imagine if I'm using your Aadhaar number, I know I get to know your Aadhaar number, and I'm opening, I'm entering your number, and I'm opening a bank account under your number. So how does it? How do you authentify that?
It doesn't work, because basically once you plug in the Aadhaar number, there is this is the one way of authentication is OTP based.
Right.
So if you do your Aadhaar, if you plug in my Aadhaar,
yeah,
I will get the OTP.
OTP.
And it's a 6-digit OTP.
Right.
So you can't kind of guess it.
Is it? Got it.
So and what happens if I am doing my Aadhaar and I, kind of log in, I get an OTP, I plug in the OTP, then Aadhaar system gives what is called electronic KYC. It gives a digitally signed document to the system which I am interacting with,
right,
which is bank. So now bank can keep it in its own records, digital electronic KYC of mine.
Right.
And then, that's done. So this is how it operates. And another part, people think that Aadhaar, there is something secret about Aadhaar number. There's nothing secret about it. It's a random number. It is actually less, it has no value. It's just a random number. Now, your mobile number is more, kind of privacy problem than an Aadhaar number. Your other things are, so this is just a random number. I had disclosed my Aadhaar number and said, do whatever you can do. Nobody could do anything.
Right. Excellent. And now coming on the social connection with the social safety net, payments, and also you spoke about the extensions of it, like the bill payments and things like that. So explain how this entire thing got connected, because even for a government, there are multiple social security programs, like, as you said, like for farmers, for poorest of the poor, there'll be multiple programs. So how can the government transfer money, and how do they know they are farmers or whether actually they are the affected people? How does this?
No, Aadhaar actually, as I explained to you, Aadhaar says X is X.
Yeah.
Right? Aadhaar does not say whether the guy is a farmer or a poor
technician,
or technician or anybody. That's not really. Eligibility for a program is not Aadhaar's domain.
Got it.
Only person. So the identification job, eligibility job is a job of the government agencies. Now, once you have identified number of persons, then what Aadhaar does is that Aadhaar enables the transfer of benefits to them directly. So how it happens, let me just explain to you. It's a little technical, but I can.
No, it is interesting. Yes. You can simplify it. Yes.
I try to simplify. So basically, suppose I have your Aadhaar number and I don't know your bank account. I don't know anything. I just know that you are a farmer and you deserve subsidy. So I just have a file, let's say Excel file, call it Excel file. 2 columns.
Right.
Aadhaar number. I don't have my name, etc. Nothing. Aadhaar number and the amount which I have to be paid.
Right.
That file I give to my bank, where my money is, where my account is. A government agency will have some account somewhere. That bank gives it to NPCI. There is a body called National Payment Corporation of India, which actually does the payment settlement business. It's actually under the RBI's, Reserve Bank of India's mandate, under their sort of control. So it goes there. Now, that the bank gives it to them. Now, before giving it to them, the bank checks as to which of these Aadhaar numbers have bank account in my bank.
Right.
So it just, because every bank account is linked to Aadhaar number. So it just, deposits the money there. The remainder, which is for other banks, goes to NPCI. NPCI has a mapper, which is also 2-column mapper. It has Aadhaar number and the bank ID, not the bank's account number, but which bank it is. ICICI or State Bank of India or something like that. So basically now this Excel file gets segregated bank-wise by NPCI. And NPCI sends this file, truncated file to various entities. So this is that switch at NPCI enables that. So now it goes to the banks. Now the core banking system of the bank knows, this bank, but this Aadhaar number has this bank account. So that gets deposited there. So that's how it happens. So it happens. It's a P2P payment switch, which actually enables the entire thing. So, bank account numbers are very complicated numbers and I can create mistakes and all that. So it's just simplified, and now you can do instantaneous transfers to millions of people.
Got it. And how does it also support the QR code payments and things like that? Is there a connection with Aadhaar to the next step that you went? Because when I was in India, like most of the payments are now going through the QR system. What was the digital transformation step which came after Aadhaar? Do you want to shed some light on that?
Basically, once you have solved the identity problem, which means that you know who this guy is and he has a means to prove this, then he can open a bank account. Similarly, once UPI is a system whereby we create payment service providers. So you open an account there. Again, authenticating yourself. So now if I have a Google Pay account or I have a Bheem or UPI, then I first of all open an account using my authentication. And once I have used my authentication, then I connect that account to various
Bank
banks.
accounts, yes.
Again using my authentication. Because bank also I need, put my PIN or put my, kind of number, and I am already authenticated in the bank. So I have to now connect. So basically I just joined that bank account. So I joined multiple bank accounts to my Google Pay or Phone Pay or Bheem or UPI. I mean other kinds of, because that's also a competing market. So this is the way the payment system or UPI, though to say, was also developed on top of Aadhaar. Because once you solve identity problem, then you have solved the problem of proxy not happening, and therefore everything is authenticated. And everything is authenticated, then you are able to do the payment systems, which worked on top of that. So put it this way, Aadhaar has created a number of digital public goods. So one of the digital public goods is electronic KYC, whereby you just say that I am who I am, and then the Aadhaar system gives an electronic, digitally signed document, what is called electronic KYC. Aadhaar does authentication, which means for simple, suppose I went to a fair price shop, as we call it, for ration shops, which give subsidized ration. I went there and I said, I am this person. So I just authenticate myself either through OTP or through biometric. And once Aadhaar says yes and no, so that gets done. We also created what is called e-sign, which is basically digital signatures on demand.
Right.
Which means that what is a digital signature? A digital signature is issued to you in form of a dongle, whereby identity is authenticated. So you will first verify that it is R.S. Sharma. Once you are verified, then you give me a dongle, which is actually a key pair, which is a private key, public key pair. And then they give me PIN also. So if I want to sign a document digitally, I plug in that thing to my computer and then, I sign.
Right.
Now, if there are two steps, which is identity authentication and also the what is called the dongle.
Dongle authentication.
The key pair, right? Put it not. So what we said was, why should there be this dongle thingy? If I am able to do the identity authentication online, so let me first do identity authentication. Thereafter, after authentication, it goes to the certifying authority which issues the public key, private key pair, and that public key, private key pair is issued, and the document is signed. So from a CAPEX model, it becomes an OPEX model. So now we are able to get a digital signature done by anybody who has got Aadhaar in just about 25 paisa, 50 paisa per digital signature. So that's another part. We also created what is called digital locker. Now, what is digital locker? Digital locker, our Prime Minister, when he launched Digital India in 2014, he said every citizen must have a private space on a public cloud. So every citizen should have some digital space out there in the cloud, where he or she can store his or her documents. Again, Aadhaar authentication creates that digital locker. And there I can store. And in fact, now what is happening is that many universities are not issuing physical certificate or physical degrees. They are just pushing that into my digital locker.
Right. So your all certificates, your degree certificates, your PhD certificates, everything would be...
Right.
Right.
Multiple things, there are multiple public goods which got created.
Very quickly, can you also explain on the bill payments that we have been discussing earlier which you mentioned?
Yes. Essentially what happens is that if there is if there are N billers and there are M customers, then the total number of transactions will take place will be N multiplied by M, right? So every biller will send to every customer of his and vice versa, and this way. Now what you do is you create a platform where every biller just posts his bills. And UPI system, once you register in UPI saying that I am a client of this electricity board and this is my number, then it basically goes to that bill platform and just checks whether there is any bill for me or not. And if there is a bill, it actually comes back to me saying that your bill is due, please pay. And I pay through UPI.
Right.
So basically what happens, it reduces the friction. It reduces the compliance of bill payments. And it's purely digital, uses the digital part. Similarly, QR code, which you asked. QR code also is nothing, but once I scan the QR code, basically UPI knows where the money has to go, and whatever money is there, it just goes there.
Dr. Sharma, thank you very much. But finally, why Sri Lanka should get support from India? Because India has experience. I know there was some conversations that India supports Sri Lanka's digital infrastructure. Any final thoughts? Because people also have the same question. Okay, why India is supporting? Whether India gets the access of the Sri Lankan data, that has been also a common conversation.
Nothing of the kind. You see, please remember, there is nothing secret about Aadhaar. The whole thing is open technology stack. In fact, we have something called MOSIP, modular open source systems, which are there. So there's nothing secret about it. I mean, it's not as if I'm putting a chip here and that data is going. No, not at all. Number one. Number two, India's approach has been Vishwa Bandhutva. The world is a family. We have a common future. That's what our Prime Minister has, in the G20 meetings which took place. So this is how it is. So essentially, we are very happy as a country to help our neighbors, our friends, and Sri Lanka is a great friend of our country, India. And therefore, the country is very happy to support all the digital initiatives. We have some experience. We are ready to share those experiences. But we have nothing to gain from those sharing. I mean, it's not a kind of quid pro quo type of situation. It's a very simple situation where we have developed certain infrastructure. We have digital infrastructure. We want to share that knowledge, and it's not only Sri Lanka. We are sharing it with multiple countries in the region and also wherever it is required. So it's not, for example, digital ID program of Morocco was actually initiated by the World Bank, and I had gone there and I had spoken for 7 days about Aadhaar.
Okay.
And they got convinced and they actually started the program.
Right.
So now the program is actually nearing its completion. So there are, ultimately the whole idea is the more digital is environment friendly. Yeah. Digital is fast. Digital is non-repudiable. So digital is the future. And we will be very happy to kind of engage with, Sri Lanka. I'm sure our Ministry of External Affairs and our country is doing that. I'm told Sri Lanka's ID program is also being supported by our country. So we will be very happy to kind of contribute or whatever.
Dr. Sharma, thank you very much. I think we could have taken this conversation for a few more hours or even for days, but I think there's a limitation on time. But thank you very much. I think you should visit more often to Sri Lanka and help us. And we would like to get your thoughts and looking forward to seeing you again and having you for more and more insightful conversations.
Thank you very much, Dana, for having me here. It's really a pleasure, and it has been a pleasure talking to you for this time, and I'll be very happy to come again and again and again. It's a beautiful country. I mean, so fascinating. People are so nice. Everything is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So subscribe us and you can see more of our content in Advocata Plus in Sinhala and also on Advocata Kural on Tamil language. But as you know, we go in depth and in detail on these conversations. Thank you very much, and we'll see you with another conversation.